Hello there, this is Welsh ASMR 82. Hey, how you doing? So this is video number 3 using this wonderful book. It is the Atlas of Unusual Borders, and we've seen the cover previously, and some of you have left a comment to say that you knew where this was. I actually found it when I was just looking at Google Maps one day, as you do. So I realised where it was before looking it up, but to encourage you to buy this amazing book, I'm not being paid, this isn't sponsored, which discovers intriguing boundaries, territories and geographical curiosities. I found this book on Amazon, and I don't want to do a video for every page because that would be really naughty, and you should go out and buy this book instead. But for the purposes of ASMR and relaxing whilst learning about some strange world geography, let's look at a couple pages. So like I said, there are 2 further videos. I'll put a link to them at the end of the video if you haven't seen them yet, but one of them was very highly watched, one of the most watched videos on my channel, so it may even be the reason why you found this channel in the first place. Shall we get on with it then? So we're going to do a couple of pages. We're going to start off with Merket Island in between Finland and Sweden up here in Northern Europe. The boundary that was redrawn to bring a new lighthouse into Finnish territory. How cool, it's even got the coordinates, you can look it up on Google Maps. So the Gulf of Bothnia, that for you that don't know is this land, this sea here between the Straits of, or between the coast of Sweden and Finland, the Gulf of Bothnia, and this is an island which is sort of halfway between both countries. And below it we can see the Baltic Sea, so closer to Estonia and not far from Russia. So we can see Finland on the eastern side and Sweden on the right, on the western side. But we can see, and we're going to read about it in a second, that this lighthouse, where this I guess was changed so that they could come into Finland, be part of Finland, not Sweden. All those who are familiar with geography know that Finland and Sweden have a mutual land border far up in the north, where Santa lives and works naturally. However, only a few will know that these 2 large Scandinavian countries border each other in the south too, just a few hundred kilometers to the north of the Swedish capital of Stockholm. There, at the entrance to the Gulf of Bothnia, lie the Åland Ahvenanmaa Islands, an autonomous province of Finland with a largely Swedish population. The westernmost island in this group is named Merket Island, meaning marker or marking, not a marketplace, and is distinctive because it is divided between Sweden and Finland and represents the only land border within the Åland Islands. The fact that the island is divided between 2 countries is not too strange. The border itself is much stranger in terms of its shape. When one looks at the map, one can see that the island is divided by a line that looks like an inverted letter S. Why is there such an unusual division of this island? First of all, it should be noted that the island in question is rocky, inhospitable and unpopulated, covering an area of over 3 hectares or so, about 300 meters long and 150 meters wide. It is one of the smallest sea islands that is divided between the 2 countries. At the end of the 19th century, the border ran straight across the center of the island, I suspected. At that time, Finland was an autonomous great principality, still belonged to the Russian Empire, and the Russians and the Finnish decided to erect a lighthouse on the island. It wasn't until construction was fully completed that someone pointed out that the lighthouse has been built on the Swedish half of the island. That situation was finally resolved in 1985 by a complicated modification of what had been a straight and simple border across the island. Two essential conditions had to be fulfilled when the border was redrawn. Each of the countries had to end up with the same amount of land as before, and they also had to have the same length of coastline as before, so as not to interfere with the rights of Swedish and Finnish fishermen in the waters encircling the island. Complicated. In this way, the land on which the lighthouse was situated was transferred to the governors of Finland. It is connected to the rest of the Finnish part of the island by just a narrow slip of land. It is interesting that Märket Island is also divided in terms of time, since Sweden and Finland are within different time zones. Oh my god. So, you are an hour later there than you are here, and you're an hour earlier here than you are there. That is so confusing. But yeah, I understand why this, because I could understand why that happened, but that makes me feel more sure about, because they took this much away from the Swedish part, so they had to take the same amount of land away from the Finnish part to give to Sweden. It is all making sense. Oh yes, I've seen these on Google Maps as well. This is very interesting. I'm not sure of the pronunciation. I'm going to say Diomede. If I'm horribly wrong, then I apologize. The Diomede Islands between Russia and the USA. You can see Russia's tip there, and this is Alaska. The two islands are separated by less than 4 kilometers, and yet they are a day apart. It's one of those weird things to do with outside of the world, isn't it? Russia and the USA, it's a nice line in the middle. The Bering Strait, the big Diomede and Diomede, the little Diomede. While much of the Earth's surface is lined by various political boundaries, there is one boundary that divides the planet according to time. This is the International Dateline, an imaginary line that extends from the North Pole to the South Pole, separating one calendar day from the next. The line mostly passes through poorly populated areas of the Pacific Ocean, far from the inhabited lands and mainland. However, as it passes through the Bering Strait, where North America and Asia, that is Alaska and Russia, are closest to each other, it creates an unusual situation for two islands, Big Diomede and Little Diomede. Although in geographical terms they both belong to the same small archipelago, the Diomede Islands are politically separated by a boundary between the two world superpowers. Big Diomede belongs to Russia, whereas Little is a part of Alaska and therefore the USA. Apart from this state border, there is another boundary that separates the two islands, the International Dateline. This very fact, combined with the fact that these islands are only about 4 kilometers apart, results in another oddity. On a clear day, from Little Diomede, known as Yesterday Island, I can see why, it is possible to see the next day on neighbouring Big Diomede, also known as Tomorrow Island. Regardless of the fact that these islands are only a short distance away from each other, the clocks on Big Diomede are 21 hours ahead of those on its smaller neighbour. Although a difference of 23 hours might have been expected, this is not the case, due to the right of every state to define its own time zones. Roughly speaking, the difference between these two islands is a whole day. Currently, nobody lives on the 30 square kilometre island of Big Diomede, since the local population was forced to move to the mainland during the Cold War to prevent contact with members of the same ethnic group on the neighbouring American island. Only a small military base is situated there today, meaning it is practically impossible to look back to the past. However, there are approximately 150 inhabitants on Little Diomede, which is just over 7 square kilometres in area. These are predominantly the Chukchi people, the ethnic group inhabiting the Chukchi Peninsula in the far east of Russia. Life is certainly not easy on Yesterday Island, but it may improve in the future if the bold idea of a bridge, a tunnel, or a combination of them is realised, connecting North America to Asia. These would definitely cross the Diomede Islands. I don't think that's happening anytime soon. In any case, the very idea that looking to one island from the other, it is possible to see another country, another continent, at another day at the same time sounds very unusual and amusing. Wow. This is interesting. The Moroccan Berm, Western Sahara. So the 2,700 kilometer sand wall that crosses the desert. So it goes there, all the way up. It says the Canary Islands, part of Spain. La Ayoun is here. Western Sahara administered by Morocco. Atlantic Ocean, this is Mauritania, Algeria, Morocco. There are various kinds of border in the world: land, river, maritime, open, closed. In certain situations, those who have claimed territory felt that it was not enough to draw an imaginary line around it and place border stones here and there. They needed to strengthen the border position with walls of varying sorts. Some of these walls are very well known. Probably the most famous one is the Great Wall of China, which marked the border between the Chinese civilization and the Mongolian barbarians. In addition to this, almost everyone has heard of the former Berlin Wall, and many people know about the walls or fences between the USA and Mexico, or between Israel and West Bank. There is another wall, a large earthwork barrier that is little known, dividing a territory rich in phosphates, but which in every other respect has been exceptionally poor and constrained for decades. This is the Moroccan Berm, or wall, which almost diagonally divides Western Sahara into two areas, one controlled by the Moroccans to the west and south, and the other to the east, which is controlled by the self-proclaimed Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. On the map, the Berm is marked by a yellow line. Western Sahara had been a Spanish colony up until after the Second World War, when Morocco and Mauritania requested the retreat of the Spaniards to leave the region divided between them. Spain did not agree to retreat until the mid-70s, which caused conflict with the Algerian-based Polisario Front, who claimed the territory. Shortly afterwards, Mauritania completely withdrew from the conflict, while the significantly superior Kingdom of Morocco relatively quickly took control of more than two-thirds of Western Sahara, including all major cities and the most important phosphate sites as well. In order to secure the border, Morocco decided to construct a series of sand and stone structures with fortifications and ramparts, whose total length soon exceeded 2,700 kilometers. Alongside the Berm, Morocco set up several million landmines and brought more than 120,000 heavily armed soldiers. In this way, the Moroccans ensured themselves unhindered access to the only natural resources in the west and south of Western Sahara, phosphates, and fish in the Atlantic Ocean. It is possible that there are potentially rich oil fields off the coast of Western Sahara, but the uncertain political status of the disputed territory may obstruct the exploitation of oil. Today, the Moroccan Berm represents a line between Moroccan-controlled areas and those areas controlled by the Polisario Front. Due to unfavourable living conditions, most of the Sahrawi, the local name for the indigenous population of this area, actually live in refugee camps in neighbouring Algeria. The Berm extends from close to the southernmost point on Western Sahara's coast. The Polisario Front allegedly controls a couple of kilometres of the coast only, along the border with Mauritania. Then it divides Western Sahara into two unequal parts, the small section of the wall crossing the border into Mauritania, ultimately terminating in Morocco, close to the border with Western Sahara. Although Morocco and the United Nations have signed a commitment to hold a referendum in Western Sahara on its future status, This has not happened so far, and most probably never will. Taking into account, of course, that part of Western Sahara is extremely rich in phosphates and fish, and that it most probably contains rich oil fields, it is no wonder that Morocco refuses to surrender its power over this sparsely inhabited territory. In fact, about 90,000 Sahrawi people have remained in this area, and Morocco's already settled several 100,000 of its own inhabitants there too. Did not know any of that. This is a curious one. Passport Island between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia here in the Middle East. The island that was created to connect two countries. This is Saudi Arabia's coastline here. And then we've got this Passport Island. And then we've got the island here, Nassan and Bahrain. It is possible for an island nation which does not share any islands with any of its neighbours. Is it possible for an island nation which does not share any islands with any of its neighbours to still have a land border? The answer is yes, at least when it comes to Arabian countries extremely rich in oil and gas. The idea of linking Saudi Arabia and its little neighbouring island of Bahrain was born long ago. It was publicly presented for the first time in the mid-1950s when the King of Saudi Arabia visited his counterpart, the Bahrain Hakim Sheikh. A more concrete outline of this idea started to appear in the late 60s, and construction of the bridge, now known as the King Fahd Causeway, took from 81 to 86. The bridge represents a significant construction achievement. It consists of a system of bridges with a total combined length of approximately 25 kilometers. While the four-lane road is over 20 meters wide, large quantities of stone, concrete and reinforced steel were used in its construction. The entire causeway consists of three segments. Firstly, the segment from Bahrain to the island of Nassan. Secondly, from Nassan to the border nation on Passport Island. And thirdly, from the border station, and thirdly from the border station to the Saudi mainland. Passport Island. No, this is not a natural island, but a very large artificial one. Almost 2.5 kilometers long and more than half a kilometer wide, the island was made in the shape of a figure 8, where one extension belongs to Saudi Arabia and the other belongs to Bahrain. The island houses border stations for both Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, along with the buildings of the Causeway Authority, 2 mosques, the Coast Guard towers of both kingdoms, and 2 tower restaurants, approximately 65 meters high, as well as one inevitable McDonald's on the Saudi side of the island. Otherwise, the island is enriched with greenery, above all with beautiful grasslands and lines of palm trees, so the impression is that of a natural island. There are plans for further expansion of this island in order to increase the number of traffic lanes. The plan includes construction of a large commercial centre on the Bahrain side, with a number of restaurants, coffee shops and stores, and even a well-equipped medical clinic. Utterly bizarre. This is an Indian one. Okay. North Sentinel Island, India. The island whose inhabitants chose to be cut off from the rest of the world. So we've got the border here with Myanmar or Burma. Here are the Andaman Islands. North Sentinel Islands here. Little Andamans down the bottom. This is the Andaman Sea. Way out in the Indian Ocean. The Bay of Bengal is here. Actually, it's technically not the Indian Ocean because it's the Bay of Bengal, but yeah. Some borders are clearly visible. Some are reinforced with walls or fences, but there are others that are invisible because their neighbouring countries wish to make life easier for their citizens. There are also borders that no one officially acknowledges, even though they very much exist. One such example surrounds the small island of North Sentinel. North Sentinel belongs to the Andaman Islands, an Indian archipelago in the Bay of Bengal. The archipelago is located opposite the shores of Myanmar, Burma, and together with the southern archipelago of the Nicobar Islands, forms the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, one of the 7 Union territories of India. The diversity of the islands is huge, ecologically, ethnically, linguistically, and economically. However, North Sentinel Island, although only 50 kilometers away from Port Blair, the capital of ANN, stands out from all other islands of this Union territory. This is the only island that is home to a tribe that absolutely refuses to have any contact with the rest of the world. I've seen a video on this on YouTube. The island has an area of about 70 square kilometers. It is almost completely forested, relatively flat, and has a population of between 100 and 500 Sentinelese people. It is not known by what name these people call themselves. According to unconfirmed sources, they call their island Chiotaquoque. In all likelihood, their language is completely incomprehensible to the inhabitants of nearby islands. It is assumed that the Sentinelese are the direct descendants of the first group of people who left Africa about 60,000 years ago and headed for Australia, following the southern coast of Asia. They are short, dark-skinned, and have curly hair. As regards to their general level of technology development, they are still at the level of the Stone Age. They probably do not have any knowledge of fire, agriculture, or numbers greater than 3, and survive only from hunting and gathering. Their main sources of food will be wild boars, fruit, fish, crabs, honey, and turtle and seagull eggs. They use bows and arrows, spears and harpoons for hunting. They have some metal weapons and tools which they will have obtained from shipwrecks around the island. The Sentinelese are extremely hostile to outsiders. Almost all previous attempts to contact them have ended tragically. This tribe does not want any contact with the outside world, and there are unconfirmed reports that they killed several fishermen who had accidentally been stranded on the coral reefs around the island, plus at least one Christian missionary who recently tried to convey the word of God to them. All Indian expeditions have had a similar experience. Their boats and helicopters were shot at. All this has led to the establishment of a kind of border around the island of North Sentinel. Although the island is formally a part of the Union territory of ANN, there is no form of government on the territory itself, nor from India. Thus, North Sentinel can be regarded as an autonomous region of India, or even as an undefined state under the protection of India. The ANN authorities officially stated in 2005 that they no longer intend to establish any contact with the Sentinelese, and that they would let them live completely undisturbed by the outside world. Furthermore, a decision was made to discourage any approaches to the island, partly so that the Sentinelese would not attack any visitors, but also to prevent the visitor from transmitting any potentially dangerous diseases to them. A restricted zone was established, which extends 5 kilometers around the island. The 2004 earthquake and tsunami had unexpected consequences for North Sentinel. The island rose by almost 2 meters, becoming attached to the neighbouring islet. The raised coral reef created large, partially closed lagoons, as well as new dry areas. The island was thus significantly enlarged. But there is a possible danger that the previous lagoons, the main fishing areas of the Sentinelese, have become dry. According to available data, most of the Sentinelese survived, and a few days after the earthquake, an Indian helicopter was driven away by fired arrows and spears. On the other side of the world, on the border of Brazil and Peru, there is another unofficial indigenous state, Javari Valley, Valley do Javari. This is a territory slightly smaller than Portugal, inhabited by numerous tribes, with about 3,000 people. At least 14 of these tribes have virtually no contact with modern civilization. And why would they want to? I bet life is a bit easier. such a good book. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And I really, really hope that you enjoyed this. You found it interesting, informative, but obviously being an ASMR channel, I hope it was also very relaxing. So check out this book on Amazon. It's not actually that expensive. And give me a like, write me a little comment, particularly if you know of any other strange borders. Subscribe to me if you haven't done so already. Check out the other 2 videos that will be in this series that will be appearing shortly. And lastly, consider joining me on Patreon for 2 exclusive videos extra every month. Okay, and a big thank you to all those that joined recently. And a very, very big thank you to all of those that have been joined for a long time. Okay, take care everyone. I hope you sleep well,